All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here for round 3 of the Gaithersburg Midseason Showdown. We have Nitesh Manem going up against Calvin Nisson. And so on Nitesh's side, we have Rhyperior, Gyarados, Gothitelle, Shiinotic, Hydreigon, and Duraludon. Meanwhile, on Calvin's side, who is going to be on our right, we have Snorlax, Whimsicott, Arcanine, Rotom Wash, Dusclops, and Sylveon. So, looking at these teams here, we do see a slower team coming out from Nitesh's side. He's going to be running that Shiinotic, the mushroom. Shiinotic is a new Pokemon to our stream. A mushroom replacement here for our boy Amoonguss, who sadly did not make the cut.
No, they've been trying to nerf him every single year until they just removed him from the deck.
The only way you got to nerf Amoonguss is just to take him out entirely. And instead, we have Shiinotic here.
Yeah. So, Shiinotic does get Spore. I believe it's the only Pokemon in the format that has Spore. The difference is that it does not have Rage Powder, so that will make that sort of interaction a little bit more interesting. The Shiinotics often run the item Room Service, which makes it slow in Trick Room and fast in a lot of Trick Room Pokemon out of Trick Room.
Right.
So it's likely, if it has it, that Nitesh wants to bring that to Calvin's team, because of the Trick Room elements and to be able to deal with the Snorlax. One of the best ways to deal with Snorlax is to put it to sleep.
Correct.
That's where most of the damage on Calvin's team comes from, though. That Snorlax.
Yeah, so Calvin, does have a way to respond to Nitesh's Trick Room setup with his own Snorlax and Dusclops, but as like you said, Shiinotic is one of the best ways to shut down any sort of opposing Trick Room if there is no combative terrain on the field, because with that Room Service, like you said, it becomes a stage slower once Trick Room activates. But instead, we're going to see no Trick Room lead from either player here. We're going to see the Sylveon and Rotom Wash come out from Calvin's side, and the Shiinotic and Gyarados coming out from Nitesh's side.
So the damage right now is coming from the Gyarados against Calvin's side of the field. Nitesh's Gyarados seems like it can put out a lot of work against the Sylveon, but it has to watch out for the Rotom. The Sylveon, however, on Calvin's side of the field is nothing resist Fairy at the moment on Calvin's side. They'll take a lot of damage from Hyper Voice, potentially Throat Spray on Sylveon to make the Hyper Voice even stronger, but Spore is such a scary move to deal with in this moment. Volt Switch into the Protect just gets blocked, and if Nitesh went for a Spore, something is going to sleep. Oh, that took so much.
Yeah, Sylveon with that Pixelate ability, those Hyper Voices are definitely going to hurt, but that Energy Ball going into the Rotom does a ton of damage. Rotom just on the brink of being KO'd. They're going to get healed back what I believe is going to be the Citrus Berry, so going to be healing up about a third of its HP there. Meanwhile, Sylveon, so Shiinotic not going on the offensive there instead of trying to put something to sleep, which I think is an interesting play, because like you said, since Shiinotic was likely going to live through that turn, it likely had a free Spore opportunity to get one off there, but it's just going to go for the Energy Ball and fail to pick up the knockout on the Rotom.
Well, that was not how I anticipated things going that turn. The damage was more than I expected on both sides. I wasn't expecting Energy Ball, even with an Energy Ball, to do that much to the Rotom, though I guess Shiinotics are often max invested, so that Energy Ball can take out Rhyperior in one hit.
Potentially.
So if Trick Room is up or Trick Room is not out, you would like the ability to knock out the Rhyperior if Room Service. Protect on the Shiinotic shows that wasn't Specs damage or something, it was just a lot of damage.
Yeah, we're going to see the Ally Switch actually come out from the Rotom here, as Gyarados going to go for a Dragon Dance, a very interesting play considering that it is still under the threat of being hit with an Electric-type move. But Sylveon going to be avoiding any kind of damage this turn and just opts to get another free Hyper Voice off into that Gyarados. That's doing a ton of damage still. So Calvin really just, he's taking a little bit of damage on his Rotom, but, Sylveon has just been getting off Hyper Voices turn after turn after turn.
So, considering that the Ally Switch just went off on the Rotom slot, the Gyarados has a dilemma in front of it, whether it wants to go for a Dynamax and the Max Vortex into the Sylveon, or to knock out the Rotom. Either one, it's going to get the knockout, but it really would prefer to hit the Sylveon this turn over the Rotom. Well, no, honestly, it probably wants to hit the Rotom, because the Sylveon won't knock it out if it Dynamaxes. The Shiinotic is still putting out a lot of pressure with the Spores, but it should get knocked out by a Hyper Voice at this point. Gyarados, with the damage it took from the Hyper Voice, will live another Hyper Voice if it Dynamaxes. No Dynamax going out. Waterfall is such a pretty animation. Doesn't knock out the Sylveon without the Max Vortex, and we see a double knockout for Calvin against Nitesh.
Yeah, even though he was able to get that Dragon Dance up there, Nitesh not getting just enough damage to knock out any of Calvin's Pokemon. And like you said, he's going to be able to take pretty much two free knockouts this turn. And the upsetting thing about Shiinotic is that, we compare it to Amoonguss a lot, but one thing that it lacks that Amoonguss did have was that Rage Powder. So, Shiinotic not really going to be able to do much on this turn since it doesn't have any moves that are going to, move before these faster Pokemon on the field.
Sylveon did not get flinched by the waterfall, taking 2 clean knockouts before Calvin's used his Dynamax. No Dynamax is used on either side of the field. Nitesh was likely saving his Dynamax for his Duraludon in the back, whereas Rhyperior wanting to maximize the effectiveness of either of these Pokemon, but in doing so, he did leave himself open to a double knockout, though never fret, because there's always a Dynamax Duraludon to help you out, and Calvin's team, honestly, on paper, looks fairly weak to the Duraludon, especially since the Rotom has taken damage.
Yeah, I was going to say the Duraludon is actually a really nice Pokemon to have here, and what better Dynamax target than Duraludon, which is, like you said, has a pretty decent matchup against Calvin's team. Doesn't really, from what we know, he doesn't really have anything that can hit it for super effective damage, and even though Sylveon's Hyper Voice is still going to be doing a ton of damage, it will likely be moving second, so that leaves it vulnerable to an attack from Duraludon.
Right.
And if it does decide to Dynamax here, either Max Steel Spike will be beneficial for the defense boost, but instead we're going to see the Flare Blitz go into Duraludon. That does a ton of damage, actually.
It does.
But we're going to see the Flash Cannon from Duraludon go into the Sylveon, easily going to pick up the knockout, and I'm assuming,
high horsepower.
Yeah, whatever Rhyperior is going to go for here, likely just going to be able to pick up the knockout on that Arcanine. But it decides to go for Rock Slide, a bit of a risky maneuver there, but it does connect, and that's going to be a clean KO onto Arcanine.
Still no Dynamaxes seen yet. The Rhyperior got the single target Rock Slide off on the Arcanine and was not intimidated because the Arcanine came in from the Volt Switch before the double knockout happened. Because Calvin's last Pokemon is Snorlax, which is slower than the Rhyperior and the Duraludon, and the Duraludon is able to just knock out the Rotom this turn if it chooses to Dynamax. Calvin's probably relying on a Dynamax Snorlax that's set up to deal with the Rhyperior or the Duraludon, but Nitesh has brought himself back into the game just because of the pressure that both of his Pokemon can put on Calvin's side of the field.
Yeah, we've seen in the earlier turns of the game that Nitesh was kind of on the back foot, but like you said, he's kind of maneuvered himself back into a winning position because now Calvin's last 2 Pokemon, Rotom, probably being a really key part of cleaning up this game, is not in the healthiest spot right now. It is definitely vulnerable from getting knocked out by the Duraludon here, but we're going to see the Rotom is actually the fastest Pokemon in the field, which is very useful information for both players. But we're just going to see a Dragon Pulse come out from Duraludon. That is most likely going to pick up the knockout there. Critical hit, didn't matter. But now we have Snorlax versus Duraludon and Rhyperior, and Snorlax just going to go for the Belly Drum here. So this Snorlax still, able to pack a punch here. Snorlax's special defense pretty good. It can tank some physical hit or some special hits, and I guess we'll have to see whether or not it's actually faster than the Rhyperior.
The other important question is whether this is Dynamax Snorlax or Gigantamax Snorlax.
Yeah.
If it's Gigantamax, it might be able to get back its berry, and that will stop Nitesh from being able to double it down with Dragon Pulse or Flash Cannon plus Max Quakes. If Nitesh wants to optimize some of the actual damage he can get, he probably goes for a Max Rockfall in order to have Sand Chip hit the Snorlax too, since the special defense boosts from Max Quake aren't helping either the Duraludon or the Rhyperior against the Snorlax. So getting the turns of Sand will help him deal with the Snorlax a little bit better. We do see the Dynamax from both the Snorlax and the Rhyperior. Snorlax a +6 prime Dynamax target. Gonna be able to easily knock out the Duraludon if he chooses to do so. We see Gigantamax, Giant Belly Button, Tree Face, Snorlax on the field. Max Replenish is not a 100% chance to get the berry back. It's a 50-50.
Yeah.
So that's really just going to decide the game, whether the Snorlax gets its berry back or not. Max Knuckle coming out of the Rhyperior, not needing to have the weakness policy activated. Instead, boosting his own attack, the Max Knuckle not doing that much damage since Snorlax is so fat.
Yeah, Snorlax is going to go for the Max Quake here, which likely reveals that it is carrying high horsepower, so it is carrying a super effective move to deal with both these Pokemon. But +6 Snorlax's Max Quake,
never does.
Not quite able to knock out Rhyperior. And if this is to be the Rhyperior that we've seen,
it's a weakness policy.
It is weakness policy, so that missing out on the KO there very critical for Calvin, because now that activates the weakness policy on Rhyperior, and that means since he didn't use G-Max Replenish, he doesn't get his berry back. So Rhyperior is able just to go first and attack because we saw that Rhyperior moved first. So that pretty much locks up the game for Nitesh.
Yeah. Wait, how is the Rhyperior's HP set 333? Does it not have any Dynamax candies?
I think that's... Yeah, I think it's not max candied. That would be the explanation, because I think Rhyperior's max Dynamax HP is supposed to be way higher.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like it's...
That looks like it has 50... That looks like it doesn't have its Dynamax candies.
Yeah, so it might not be fully candied up here. So that would explain the lack of the maximum HP.
But even still, it still took the +6 high horsepower because of Solid Rock and then Rhyperior's absurd base defense stat.
Oh, we have to go do this.
Yeah. Oh, guys, pause.
All right, now we do our favorite part in the middle of the stream, in the middle of the matches. We go and change out our switch, or now re-enter spectator mode. But yeah, really clean game. Well, actually, it didn't look too good for Nitesh in the beginning, but he was able to come back just because he just simply had the Pokemon advantage. Calvin, showing off his Gigantamax Snorlax, revealing Belly Drum, just not able to take on the combined force of Duraludon or Rhyperior. But actually seeing that Max Knuckle is pretty crucial information for Calvin there, because now he knows that not only does Rhyperior have an attack that can hit Snorlax, but now he also has a means of further boosting his stats. And we're going back into team preview here. Rajan is back from his...
I have to set it up every game.
His roundly errand. But yeah, we know what the teams are at this point. Rajan, what do you think we're going to see in Game 2?
I think that Calvin's probably going to just have to prioritize his Rotom a bit better and getting the damage on the Duraludon. Nitesh did a great job preserving his Duraludon for the end game, but he didn't actually choose to Dynamax and instead hoping to get the damage off from the Rhyperior. The Max Knuckle is a really exciting reveal for Nitesh, because then he's not reliant on... for example, Snorlax can't just go for a max replenish and then a max quake to knock it out. Instead, he can max knuckle himself and then still get bigger damage out. So, I'm not too sure what Calvin's adjustments might be. He probably needs to just get the wisps out better, do more effective damage in the beginning, not waste the turns with Ally Switch, and instead just try to take an early knockout so he can do something with his Snorlax. The team being so reliant on Snorlax means if Nitesh is able to mitigate the damage or set up his Rhyperior or put it to sleep or something, Calvin's team's not doing that much.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that Sylveon was doing a lot of work in the early game, but that's merely because Nitesh was either playing really passively or just had really slow Pokemon on the field. But once you have Pokemon that are faster than that Sylveon, its effectiveness kind of just went away. But at that point, it had already taken a lot of damage. Yeah. I wouldn't say Calvin's team is per se reliant on Snorlax. From what I've heard around the room, is that he has a bit of a more offensive variant of Arcanine that would pair with his Whimsicott. That's all I'll say for now, but I think
I get it. I'm just saying, the Sylveon we saw is probably choice specs from the damage from before.
Absolutely.
But what I'm more getting at is if he brings the same Pokemon that he did before. He has the Rotom, the Sylveon, the Snorlax, and what did he bring? He brought the Arcanine?
Arcanine and Snorlax.
Yeah, so outside of that, the Snorlax is really the only one that's putting out too much pressure. The Sylveon's, fine. We see that Nitesh decides to lead the Duraludon this game, put out more early game pressure against the Sylveon so he can't put out Hyper Voices. Shiinotic can pretty freely stick a Spore in the Rotom spot. It went for an Energy Ball game 1, but who cares?
Because Rotom was able to recover most of it, or at least some of its HP back. Yeah, it was able to eat that Energy Ball and get its HP back. Some of its HP back with the Citrus Berry, but Rotom being the fastest Pokemon on the field here, probably not going to be super... important here, considering it doesn't really threaten a lot of damage against either of these Pokemon, as it's just going to Volt Switch right out of there. Like you said, these two Pokemon don't really threaten Shiinotic a whole lot, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not Nitesh decides to go on the offensive again, or just decides to fire off a Spore. But yeah, Duraludon being in here against Sylveon, going to go for the Flash Cannon, does not get the KO here.
Double up.
Yeah, Sylveon just going to get another Hyper Voice off here, but that does a ton of damage to both of these Pokemon. But instead, we're going to see the Spore come out here into the Arcanine switch, and Nitesh making I guess would be the correct adjustment here.
Yeah, getting the Spore off into that spot. Arcanine hasn't taken a sleep turn yet, so Arcanine is guaranteed going to be sleeping on this turn. Calvin now can just get a free Flash Cannon / Spore into the Sylveon spot if he so pleases to take a knockout or to sleep a switch in. There is, if the Sylveon is locked into Hyper Voice, then there's nothing really that Calvin can do to stop that slot from dying or getting put to sleep, since we saw that the Duraludon outruns the Sylveon. He chooses instead to switch out the Sylveon into the Rotom, and if it I don't know if the Flash Cannon Energy Ball would knock it out, but Shiinotic chooses not to go for a Spore instead, switching into the Gyarados, which is vulnerable to the Rotom Wash's Volt Switch. And now Rotom's probably going to take a Flash Cannon from the Duraludon, which was aimed into the Sylveon spot.
Yeah, so, Rotom not really minding the Flash Cannon here.
No, and now Rotom is looking like he can put the pressure on the Gyarados with the electric moves. Arcanine having the Flare Blitz pressure against the Duraludon. It might be at -1, but I think the Flare Blitz still probably knocks it out unless the Duraludon Dynamaxes.
Yeah, so we're gonna see Rotom, able to hopefully handle that Gyarados. I don't think we've seen the speed interactions between Rotom and Gyarados yet. Well, yeah, we haven't seen it yet. So if Rotom is able, Rotom will likely not be able to knock out Gyarados outright with Volt Switch, especially if it potentially decides to Dynamax. That's definitely not going to be enough. And that also means that Rotom will have to switch out too, so Rotom won't be a staying presence on the field.
Right.
But now we also have, Duraludon's still at pretty low HP. It's likely going to be one of the slower Pokemon on the field. So if Arcanine decides to wake up early, it could mean that Arcanine is able to pick up the KO. But no, we're just going to see Calvin switch out his Arcanine, going into the Snorlax here. Gyarados is going to switch out here on Nitesh's side. He's going to switch into the Shiinotic to take a potential Volt Switch, but Shiinotic not really going to appreciate that. It's very low HP. But Rotom actually, with Gyarados actually switching out here, Rotom pivoting might actually be better for Calvin.
Yeah, so I think what we just saw is Nitesh suffering a bit from the positioning choices he gave himself. When he had the opportunity to Flash Cannon and Spore the Sylveon and keep the Shiinotic in, he would have caught the Rotom with Spore and would have had more pressure on his side of the field. Instead, by switching into the Gyarados, he made himself vulnerable to the Rotom switching in, and then he had to switch right back out. So he just lost all of the momentum that he had building up. On the previous turn, depending on the Gyarados set, he could have Dynamaxed if he had an Assault Vest set, and Dynamax ate the Volt Switch and then went for a Sky Strike into an Overgrowth perhaps to hit the Rotom since no Intimidates went off. It just seems like Nitesh has decided to give up the offensive pressure this game.
Yeah, he's been honestly playing pretty passively, which is kind of just let Calvin rack up a bunch of damage on his Pokemon that just seem to keep rotating out. But speaking of rotating out, we're going to see Calvin's Snorlax go into his Sylveon now. Arcanine just going to stay asleep. Doesn't feel like waking up at all. Duraludon going to go for a Dragon Pulse. Aims into the Arcanine here. Going to be doing some nice damage. Yeah,
that's great damage.
And Shiinotic going to go for a Spore into the Sylveon, which... Wait a minute, did Sylveon not...
It just switched in.
Oh, that's right. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, so the Spore goes off. All of Calvin's side of the field is taking a nap. Calvin can pretty safely switch in the Gyarados on this side of the field and go for a Spore, or he can just forfeit the Shiinotic and he can Spore into the Arcanine, switch Duraludon into Gyarados if he wants. Then Rotom will be on the field, and depending on the Rotom set, the Gyarados can take it out. He doesn't have a great opportunity to Dynamax right now, and Calvin doesn't really either, nor do you want to waste a Dynamax turn on a potentially sleeping Arcanine. But the third sleep
turn, yeah,
really helps Nitesh out right now.
Yeah, because now it allows him to actually start... Arcanine's waking up there would have been pretty important for Calvin there, because that likely would have meant that he would have been able to knock out Duraludon. But now, since Arcanine stayed asleep for that third turn, Duraludon is able to get a free knockout onto that Sylveon, as this means Calvin is going to bring in his Rotom now. And, like you said, Nitesh isn't really in a position where he wants to be Dynamaxing. So, yeah, he's going to be able to get some... get some damage off here, but I mean, now he's kind of in a position. Arcanine's guaranteed to wake up next turn, and Rotom is going to be faster than the Shiinotic, which is only at 14 HP, so that means Volt Switch is going to be able to knock out Shiinotic at this point. So now Calvin's in a position where
Calvin
he can
Dynamax the Arcanine now, too, if he wants. Yeah, Max Flare into the Duraludon, a Volt Switch into the Shiinotic, and then try to rack up damage that way. Right. By not waking up on the previous turn, he guarantees wakes this turn and can go for more damage, especially since he has the guaranteed knockouts on the field right now. He can He can take 2 knockouts right now if he wants. The only way that Calvin really covers that is by maxing the Shinotic or protecting with the Shinotic, and the Duraludon still gets knocked out. Calvin chooses not to max, instead trying to save it for maybe his healthier Rotom Wash. So we can get a guaranteed max Vortex into the Rhyperior or something. The Shinotic is still in range for anything that Calvin can do, and the Gyarados is in range for max Lightning, and then Rhyperior for max Vortex. So the Rotom being a max target instead of the Arcanine gets a lot more effective damage.
Yeah.
And he gets more effective bulk because his HP is higher.
Yeah, we're still waiting to see what Nitesh is going to switch in here.
Duraludon was the scariest Pokemon he had going on at the moment, since it was the only one that wasn't weak to the Rotom. And he hasn't, unlike the last game, where he did get the Energy Ball off into the Rotom, he had a lot of good damage there, where he was able to take the knockout on the Rotom eventually. This game he hasn't been able to put out anything into the Rotom.
Yeah.
And is instead kind of suffering accordingly.
Yeah, so he's going to instead bring in Rhyperior here, which is an interesting switch in because Rhyperior, you know, when it's Dynamaxed, it doesn't really mind taking super effective attacks, but when both players have the option to Dynamax, it definitely does not. Like, if it was Dynamax, I guess it wouldn't mind taking a Hydro Pump, but now since Rotom has the option to Dynamax, it definitely doesn't want to take a Max Geyser.
Yeah, Nitesh is still facing 2 knockouts on board right now. He could potentially consider pivoting the Rhyperior into the Gyarados to waste a Dynamax turn into a Max Vortex, and then alternatively Dynamaxing the Gyarados to potentially live the Max Volt Lightning based off of the Gyarados' item if it's Wakan or Assault Vest. But he doesn't look like he's in an incredible spot right now because of the Dynamax pressure from the Rotom. And especially since he left the Rhyperior in, the best he can do is protect the Rhyperior, eat a Max Vortex, and then take like 45%. But instead he chooses to max the Rhyperior, potentially blocking the turn with a Max Guard. Rhyperior went first in its Dynamax, so Rotom did not Dynamax this turn, which is an interesting decision. Oh, yeah, if it's Lightning...
we're going to see a Wild Charge come out into the Gyarados here, which actually makes some sense here because, you know, Nitesh's only switch in is going to be that Gyarados, and, you know, Calvin correctly predicted the right slot it was going to switch into. So, you know, making Arcanine's last turn on the field worthwhile as he gets a ton of damage onto that Gyarados, and Rotom not choosing to Dynamax but getting a very crucial Will-O-Wisp on that turn, but that Max Rockfall still did a very decent chunk with the critical hit, of course.
I think that it's just the Wild Charge was going to knock out the Shinotic from the range it was in anyway, so...
That was definitely a very
It was able to cover
play.
The Gyarados and get the knockout on the Shinotic regardless. Wild Charge is an interesting pick on the Arcanine since we haven't seen Intimidate from the Arcanine. We're seeing Wild Charge. I think it's safe to assume that the Arcanine is beat up. Or, excuse me, the Arcanine is justified and the Whimsicott is beat up. The Rotom is putting out all the pressure in the world right now, and it looks like the game is is wrapped up for the Rotom.
Yeah, I think realistically, once Rotom Dynamaxes, it's going to be, you know, making full use of that offensive pressure. Calvin just, you know, getting the most out of his turns here. And I think if there's one turn to Dynamax Rotom, it would be this turn because now that you've wasted your burn. Last turn would have been nice too, but I think like if there is a time to Dynamax, it would probably be now because now, you know, you can Max Geyser, you know, in a position to do a lot of damage, if not just outright knock out the Rhyperior. And, you know, 3 turns definitely enough to clean up these last couple knockouts here. But, you know, Max Guard is still an option for Nitesh if he wants to potentially try and stall out these Dynamax turns. But I'm not really sure how much it's going to matter in the end, or in the long run. But instead, we're just going to see G-Max Snorlax coming out here.
I love seeing Gigantamax Snorlax. His belly button's so funny looking.
He's got a nice big tree on there.
Big tree up in
channeling
here.
Some real Torterra energy.
Nitesh, regardless of what he was able to do, just didn't have the damage to deal with a Snorlax in its Dynamax form, especially since he got the Will-O-Wisp on the Rotom Wash. He goes for a Max Knuckle, but he's +1 in burn, so it's not really doing anything. And it looks like Calvin should be able to take this one. Max Replenish. I don't remember if Rotom had a Citrus Berry.
It did.
So is it getting it back?
It doesn't look like it.
It didn't get it back.
Yeah.
I think Calvin's just waiting for the right period to run out of Dynamax, and he's going to Hydro Pump it at that point. But I kind of forgot that there was still a Shiinotic.
Yeah, Shiinotic, well, I mean, like, it's not really that much
It
HP.
spores the Snorlax, and now the Rotom has to hit the Shiinotic. So the right period does get a hit off into the Rotom if the Rotom chooses to knock out the Shiinotic before it spores the Snorlax. So there is a dynamic here because of the Shiinotic that didn't exist without it. I don't think still that Nitesh has enough damage to deal with the Snorlax, and this Rhyperior is burned, though.
Right. Yeah, Shiinotic being faster than Snorlax is definitely tricky for Calvin here, especially since he doesn't really have any more pivots left. Yeah, Shiinotic just going to go for a Protect, though.
Expecting the knockout into the Shiinotic and leaving the Rhyperior alone. We do see the Volt Switch going into the Shiinotic, intending to knock it out. Rhyperior should be cleanly rock falling into the Rotom, taking that knockout. And the Shiinotic does have the option to spore the Snorlax, which I believe is Calvin's last Pokemon.
Unless if Snorlax decided to target into the Shiinotic, which I'm not sure.
Which is likely.
Yeah, it's possible. Yep, just going to go for the Max Replenish into the Shiinotic.
That makes a lot of sense. He doubled into the Shiinotic to knock it out.
Critical hit, not going to matter. Absolutely not going to matter. Shiinotic just going to go down this turn as Max Replenish hits through the Protect. Not going to recover any berries because Snorlax hasn't consumed its berry yet. But now this is the... that's already been 3 turns for Nintendo. Yeah, so Rhyperior's Dynamax is gone, however. Calvin still gets a Max Quake off here, which, you know, if Nitesh decides to Protect here, which he could, Max Quake not going to be doing a whole lot of damage, but now Rhyperior, that would activate Rhyperior's weakness policy.
Yeah, but then he'd have to get the Snorlax knockout with a +3 Snorlax, or a Superpower while burned, and that doesn't do anything.
Well, I mean, after this turn, it'll be normal Snorlax again. So we actually see Max Darkness here.
Not wanting to proc the weakness policy,
that's smart.
Giving more information about the Snorlax's moveset.
Yeah, but potentially a smart play to not proc the weakness policy, just to, you know, at this point, I feel like Snorlax, you know, can still go for these attacks and just kind of dance around the weakness policy, as Rhyperior is not doing a whole lot of damage, especially since it can't boost its attack anymore with Max Knuckle.
Yeah, I think the Rhyperior just was put on too scary of a timer. The Snorlax has so much HP left. Still has its berry. The Rhyperior is not taking damage really from the Rock Slide or from the Darkest Lariat, but I really want to see a Darkest Lariat right now. Snorlax,
Gonna go for Belly Drum.
That seemed wrong. That seemed very not correct.
Yeah, because now Snorlax is forced to consume its berry, and that puts Calvin in a position where
he can Superpower to knock it out. I just disagree with that play.
Yeah, I'm not sure what...
One Rock Slide flinch will put it into a Superpower.
Or if Superpower isn't enough to just knock it out from here.
I don't think it is, because it's a burned but +1, but Rock Slide into Superpower definitely knocks it out, so Calvin, by proccing his own berry, put himself in range to lose to a Rock Slide flinch, and, well... I don't love that.
Yeah, that was probably not it wasn't probably the ideal play for Calvin there, because having that berry recovery would have been very nice to have in the end game here, but instead he's just gonna rock it himself.
See if we flinch or not.
Yeah, flinching here would mean likely the game, but Snorlax gonna get the high horsepower. It is gonna connect onto Rhyperior, and that is gonna be it.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting end game here, but Calvin still able to clutch it out by, you know, dodging the Rock Slide flinch there, and he's going to take game 2. So we are now 1-1 in the set. Calvin able to bring this one back. We are now in the transition phase where we're going to be going into game 3. By the way, guys, if you guys have any feedback about the stream, and apparently we're getting a phone call here, I apologize for that background noise, but like I was saying, if you guys have anything you need, or anything that's, you know, up or wrong with the stream, or anything that you think we should fix, please let us know. We will take all forms of feedback. Feel free to be as mean as you want. Not too mean, but, you know, we'll still appreciate the feedback regardless. And we're going into team preview once again. And
hello.
Rajan is finally back.
What do you mean finally?
He's back.
Exactly, and you're better off for it.
Facts.
Yeah, so that last game was interesting to me. I think Nitesh used his Shiinotic a little bit more effectively, but he put himself on the back burner by wasting 2 turns when he switched Shiinotic into Gyarados and Gyarados back into Shiinotic. He still kept himself available to the end, or he kept himself in a possible to win situation up until the end of the game by preserving the Shiinotic's HP, but I think it would have been more effective if he was able to use his Pokemon more offensively.
Right.
Whereas Calvin decided that he was going to stick to a similar game plan, trying to set up the Snorlax in the end game and go through Nitesh's Pokemon. I don't love the way he did it at the end because he left himself so vulnerable to that Rock Slide flinch without getting enough damage.
Right. I think Calvin was doing a pretty good job for the rest of the game trying to mitigate, Nitesh's damage output there. I think the Will-O-Wisp on Rhyperior definitely made a lot of difference in that game. But yeah, like you said, that end game there was pretty dicey for Calvin. It could have definitely gone south really quickly if something...
It just took one flinch. If he
one flinch would have done it,
If he hadn't done that and he throat chopped twice more, he should have been in a range where his berry would activate, or he'd have enough HP to eat the superpower.
Yeah.
And then he could go for a high horse ride to take the knockout, because there'd be 2 turns of burn and 2 turns of throat chop. So I don't really understand that belly drum. That being said, Calvin led Rotom Sylveon this game against Hydreigon Duraludon. We see a new approach from Nitesh, and Nitesh's new approach is press the scary buttons quickly and Dynamax immediately.
Yeah, Dynamaxing, which will likely be the Duraludon. Trying to get rid of the Sylveon as soon as possible, because that is probably the biggest threat to this Hydreigon on the field.
And the ally switch from the Rotom Wash won't do anything to Duraludon's Stalwart because the Z Steel Spike will go right into the Sylveon regardless of ally switch. We see ally switch, but I think Calvin forgot the mechanic because that Sylveon is locked in and getting smacked. Draco Meteor goes into the Sylveon, but I don't think Nitesh cares about that much.
Yeah, because
he just wants this knockout right now, like this.
Yeah, he's able to get that KO there with the Max Steel Spike. You know, we saw Flash Cannon not quite able to do the job last game, but
with a Max Steel Spike, the job has been finished. The only real... So now we see the power of a Max Duraludon. It locks in on its targets and smacks things till they die, forcing Calvin to go into Snorlax early, hoping to be able to weather the hits from this Duraludon.
Yeah, because, you know, the Gigantamax is still on board for Calvin here, but, you know, if he chooses to Dynamax immediately with the Snorlax, he misses out on a potential boosting opportunity, which means Snorlax's damage output is going to be very, very lacking. Yeah. Meanwhile, on Nitesh's side, you have 2 heavy-hitting Dragon types on the side of the field. Of course, you know, the special attack's not going to be doing a whole lot to Snorlax, but, you know, Snorlax's not going to be able to do a whole lot back, considering now both these Pokemon have defense boosts thanks to Steel Spike.
Yeah. And Rotom, however, isn't really doing that much damage to either, because they're both resistant to water and electric and both special attackers too. Calvin chooses, I think that's the Snorlax.
Yep.
To go for the Max and the Snorlax, but if Nitesh just accrues more defense boosts, the Snorlax is gonna have a hard time doing anything.
Yeah, especially since it sacrifices the ability to boost once it goes for that Gigantamax. And now Rotom, you know, is not really in a position to do much either since it's facing down 2 Dragon types. But instead, we're going to see the Dark Pulse come out here into the Rotom.
Nitesh is trying to just get the good damage into the Pokemon he can more easily knock out, deciding to solo the Snorlax, or to 1v3 or 1v4 the Snorlax in the end game. Volt Switch coming out from the Rotom after eating a Dark Pulse, proccing the Citrus Berry. The Citrus Berry, because the Rotom is no longer on the field, if the Snorlax gets a Max Replenish off, the Citrus Berry doesn't have a chance to get that back. Arcanine not doing too much right now. No Intimidate, that doesn't even matter. And Nitesh goes for a Wormwind, even further reducing the Arcanine's attack and trying to get neutral damage into the Snorlax.
Yeah,
into the Rotom.
Yeah, just getting that G-Max Wormwind, or the Max Wormwind there, pretty good for Nitesh because he's now not only increased his defense, but now he's also lowered the attack stat.
And that's the saddest looking. That's the saddest Max Replenish I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, especially did that go into Hydreigon?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still not doing much at all.
And the Hydreigon is still faster than the Arcanine, so the Arcanine can't get Flare Blitz into Duraludon, even if the Arcanine is at -1. The Dark Pulse is going to probably go into the Arcanine or into the Arcanine's Protect, but either way, he's not worried about the Snorlax's damage. Things are looking really strong for Nitesh because he's looking at his pieces saying, I can do damage quickly, and I'm going to do it quickly. And when he started to do it quickly, Calvin had a hard time keeping up.
Yeah, Calvin just, not really keeping up with Nitesh's damage at this point. Just getting subject to heavy damage from Hydreigon, which doesn't...
Oh,
yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, how he actually Dark Pulses into the Arcanine, I guess not anticipating the Justified, even though we kind of already confirmed that.
Or
but
more
the
not
play rough-
anticipating it to live.
Right, yeah.
Considering the Dark Pulse's damage from before, I think he expected it to get knocked out.
Right.
Letting the Hydreigon knock out to the play rough because the Arcanine stayed alive. Another Worm went into the Snorlax, reducing its attack and further mitigating its damage against the Duraludon, but the Snorlax does get one more turn of Max that the Duraludon doesn't.
Yeah, the Max Quake here going into the Duraludon, not going to do a whole lot of damage, but yeah, that's super effective Max Quake, not doing a single thing to that Duraludon. But you know, Snorlax does get a special defense boost, and we do confirm that there is no weakness policy on this Duraludon.
That's so funny. I think all that Nitesh needs to do is bring the Shiinotic out, put a Spore into the Snorlax, knock out the Rotom as quickly as he can, or just Energy Ball the Rotom or something, and then win with the Rhyperior in the end game, because the Snorlax, I guess, can Belly Drum when it's no longer maxed. He could max Guard now or something and then Belly Drum, but I just think he has a hard time actually doing to 1v3 that.
Yeah, he just has a tough time here because, we did confirm that Shiinotic was faster than the Snorlax, so it is able to put it to sleep, and Rotom is certainly not doing enough damage to either of these Pokemon to make any sort of impact here. Hydro Pump actually doing a little bit of damage. Okay, critical hit.
All these crits on stream. What are we doing?
Duraludon going to go for the Dragon Pulse here into the Rotom.
Doubt it kills.
Yeah, probably not. It's close to getting the KO, but Spore into Snorlax going to mean the end of its Dynamax here, as it's not going to be able to move this turn because of its guaranteed sleep turn.
Yep.
And now... you mentioned that Snorlax could potentially Belly Drum. Well, not anymore. It does have to take. It does have the opportunity to wake up this turn. It's very unlikely, but it does have. There's still a chance he could wake up this turn.
The issue is that he can't attack through the Shiinotic, throwing spores into the slot. So, since that last Hydro Pump was a crit, Duraludon still probably eats another Hydro Pump. And when it knocks out the Rotom, the Shiinotic, and then what's most likely a Rhyperior in the back should be able to take out the Snorlax pretty easily. I think that things are looking like a wrap for Nitesh as long as he puts the damage out into any slot and doesn't spam hits against the Snorlax or the Rotom presses Hydro Pump repeatedly.
Yeah, Calvin just not really threatening a whole lot of damage here at all. We're going to see the Hydro Pump go into the Duraludon.
And only knocks out with a crit.
Yeah,
not even
enough.
with a crit.
Duraludon just going to get a Dragon Pulse here into the Rotom. Shiinotic, it's probably just going to go for an Energy Ball here.
Yeah,
not
Spore
gonna
can't be helpful right now because it would wake up after the Spore.
Not going to be doing a lot of damage at all.
No. So Nitesh played this endgame a lot better than the last games. He's just saying, we're getting damage.
Yeah, what's unfortunate here is this is going to be kind of a slow end game because now we have to see the Snorlax get whittled down by.
He has a Rhyperior in the back.
We just kind of have to wait until either of these Pokemon get knocked out, and then Rhyperior's physical attacks likely able to dispose of the Snorlax. But I mean, for the rest of this game, Nitesh is just gonna, like you said, basically be clicking the attack button until Snorlax just goes away. But Nitesh playing this game. Cleaning up this end game, much more effectively, creating a much cleaner end game where he just, has a very straightforward line of just clicking buttons here.
Click the buttons until the things go away. The Snorlax with the special defense boost is more annoying this game, but it's just taking more time.
Yeah, not really much to say, honestly.
I just think what happens is Nitesh realized his damage options, realized he had the pieces to be more aggressive early as opposed to wasting his turns, and then just took the knockouts as soon as he could. The Sylveon on Calvin's side of the field being so vulnerable to the Duraludon meant that the Hydreigon got to actually play.
Yeah.
The only real risk there was if the Sylveon maxed and then lived the Steel Spike and then hit the Hydreigon, but I'm pretty sure if the Sylveon maxes,
it probably goes for Duraludon.
Pixelate doesn't have a boost anymore. I think there's some weird mechanic there.
Yeah, because I don't think Hyper Voice would turn into Starfall.
I have no idea how it works. But I think there's an issue. He'd lose the Specs boost for sure, and he'd have to single target.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works.
There's weird stuff with that, but maxing the Sylveon didn't feel that great for Calvin, and then he wouldn't have the max Snorlax.
Yeah.
So as soon as the Sylveon, we just see a high horsepower miss, but honestly, who cares? Because the Sylveon went out early, the Hydreigon was able to put out damage, and Nitesh was just able to take the game. That was my concern. I just didn't like where the damage was on Calvin's team. It felt like it was only on the Snorlax.
Yeah, it just kind of seemed like he had to rely on that Snorlax, and after getting Max Wormwind